your business acumen kind of actually began when you were in high school and your dad wanted you to get a job.
Yeah.
So, that was where it really kind of began for you.
You know, Levi. So my dad was giving me a really hard time my freshman year in college because I had never had like an actual job. And it was not because I was privileged or entitled. It was because all I did was play tennis and all I did was practice. And so it was very hard to have a job. So he said, this summer you have to get a job. Like he just laid down the law. And I got some interviews and actually got a job at Papado's, waiting tables.
Italian? Cajun food.
Cajun food, yeah, Cajun seafood. I had to start waiting these tables. I had to memorize this huge menu. It was nothing that I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was play tennis. And then I recognized through a friend that, a lot of people in our community spend a lot of money at country clubs paying for lessons for their kids to go to summer camp, tennis camp, or women's leagues or private lessons. And I was like, well, I can teach tennis as good as anyone. All I've done my whole life is play tennis. So I literally create a flyer, went to Kinko's, made like 500 of them or maybe 1,000 and put them in every mailbox in my neighborhood. And the next day I started getting phone calls. And so my dad came home from work and he saw me out. We had a tennis court, so that's important to know, in the backyard. And he saw me out there and he's like, what happened to Blake?
I thought you were supposed to be working.
Yeah, and my mom was like, he is working. And he tells me he's making 5 times as much per hour.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was my first entrepreneurial venture.
So you saw then what scripture describes as you being the tail or being the head, and you're like, I'm not going to be the tail. I'm going to be the head. I'm going to get paid. And then also finance a passion.
Yeah.
So that was
what I love to do.
Right.
And it was what I was good at. I mean, there were a lot of people, that could do the other job I was going to do, but this was what I was good at. I love kids. I love teaching people.
Which sort of, since seeing this as your first job, is a seminal, I think, trait about you that is amazing. And especially in our day today, where it's like, how do I get my $1 million by 30 and cash out and be done? But then it's like, what then?
I feel like if you are lucky enough to be able to match your passion and your talent to something that you find meaningful in the world, it's truly one of the greatest gifts and joys in your life. Incredible. And I've been able to do that at different stages in my life, and frankly, I didn't know if I would get to do it again until recently. I
feel like there's this almost like ridiculous dichotomy where either we choose success by whatever you would define that as, or you're going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And what I like about you, and it's so refreshing, is this idea that you've had this revelation. Actually, the more I'm successful, so long as my heart's right and I made the right decisions, the more I'm actually going to make a difference because of my success. And I feel like this is such an important conversation, and I really want Fresh Life, our church community, and our larger podcast audience to understand that it's not bad to want to be successful.
Sure.
And God actually wants that.
Totally.
And to have this small thinking, zero-sum pie mentality, where it's like, no, if I'm blessed, if this is big, that's wrong. No, but the revelation that the greater the blessing can be, actually the greater good I can do. So the more I give, the more I'm living.
Yeah, and when the opportunity is the more that you are blessed with success, and there's so many different definitions. We could spend a whole nother hour talking about really what are we talking about when we talk about success.
But if we're being specific, commercial success.
Yeah, commercial success is then that gives you a bigger platform to do bigger things. So much of what I think Tom's has done is inspired hundreds and maybe thousands of other businesses to incorporate giving or a one-for-one model into what they do.
No doubt.
And it's given me a platform. So I actually think of our impact isn't the 88 million children we've given shoes to. It's actually all these other businesses that have committed their business.
Subway.
Exactly.
Gap.
To giving back.
I mean, just
Warby Parker. You name it.
All the list goes on. Okay. So from there, of course, the driver's ed company, you rethought that. And I like the trend, honestly. You never invented anything new.
No.
You looked at tired things and breathed new life into them.
Well, what I found, specifically in the driver's ed business is this has been around for, as long as people learn to drive, right? I think so much of being an entrepreneur or looking at the world with kind of a fresh perspective is not necessarily thinking of some huge, big new idea. It's just how do we take things that we're already doing and making them better.
Yeah, I've heard it called vuja de.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Deja vu is, I feel like I've seen that before. And Vujade is trying as hard as you can to pretend like you've never seen it before.
Oh, that's interesting.
So how would
I
we
like
do
that.
driver's ed if we never had done it? How would we do shoes if we had never done it? How would we do laundry at college if
That's
it had
great,
never been done
Vujade.
before? And that's, I think, or that could be the sequel to your book. You know what I mean?
That might be the next title.
So then, of course, comes the trip back to Argentina.
Yeah.
Back because you had already been there on the Amazing Race.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is in the spirit of what you had just said, another chance to learn. Of course, so many people watched 4 minutes, this close.
So close.
Right there. But I think it's pretty interesting to think that you may never have started Tom's had you won.
No, I think there's a great Garth Brooks song that says, I thank God for unanswered prayers,
Wow.
right? And I think that there is so much of that is just absolute truth. Like, we have these desires in our life. We think what we know. We pray. And we really hope this. And then sometimes when things don't happen, we look to God. We look around and we're like, why me? Why not? But, there's a bigger plan. And if I had won the Amazing Race, I definitely wouldn't have had the ambition and the drive that I had to go on and do these other things, and especially Tom's. I mean, I think my sister and I would have probably taken that money, invested in real estate, and, gone on with our life. But instead, I was still hungry. And that led to an exploration.
So you end up in Argentina. You're playing polo. You're kind of putter around the city, wanting to see it because you went through it so fast on the Amazing Race.
Sure.
You didn't get to see much.
Yeah.
You stumble across a girl who's raised a bunch of shoes donations from people. She's gone, can I have shoes? Can I have shoes? Can I have shoes? And you're watching her give them out to kids who need them?
No, when I met her, there were actually 3 women that had been doing this for about 2 or 3 weeks. They'd gone to collect slightly used shoes, like a shoe drive, like we might
the traditional mission trip kind of approach.
Traditional.
Yeah.
And so she was doing this, and I was like, wow, like I had just for the past couple weeks seen so many street kids without shoes. And in my mind, I'd been thinking like, A, why are these kids not in school? Why do they not have shoes? And that was my first experience with some pretty intense poverty just outside of the city of Buenos Aires. And so when she told me she was doing this project to help kids get shoes, I was like, oh, thank goodness someone's doing this, because I've been thinking this the past month as I've been in and around the city. And so, I always like to try new things. I mean, that's the thing that I would say, if there's one thing that's been consistent in my life is I never miss an opportunity to try something new. And so I was like, look, if you need volunteers, I'll go. I'll help. I'll put shoes on kids' feet. Why not? And so she let me go, and I had the experience. It was an absolutely beautiful day in this town, Los Pilitones. The kids, their parents, everyone was just so joyful. I mean, you would have thought it was Christmas Day. And we weren't even giving new shoes. We were giving used shoes. But these kids were literally as if this was
and they didn't always fit, right?
Yeah, this is the greatest gift ever. And so that experience is what planted the seed that made me know and experience the joy of giving in such a raw and intimate way.
Yeah. You have this idea of selling them.
Well, actually, the reason I had the idea was actually a very important question that someone asked me. And so I feel sometimes in life, it's there's sometimes that God is whispering and sometimes that he's shouting.
Yeah.
And I feel this was a shouting moment. Because what happened was I felt great after giving these kids shoes all day long. And I came back to the polo camp where I was staying, and my polo teacher, his name is Alejo, and I was telling him at dinner about this awesome experience, and then now these kids were going to go to school because they had shoes and that was needed for the uniform. And he listened and he listened. And he said, man, I think it's amazing what you've done in my country today. Most people would come on vacation and they wouldn't even think about doing something like this. So he started with, this is amazing. He said, but I have to ask a tough question, I think, because what's going to happen when those kids wear out of their shoes? Wow. You're going back to California next week. The 2 women that I met were from the UK. They're going back on this is a volunteer vacation for them. Who's going to get the kids the next pair of shoes? And if you really care about these kids being in school and they need shoes, what's going to happen? And so that question, when I went to bed that night, haunted me. I went from thinking I did something really great that day to feeling am I just doing something that makes me feel good, that actually is exasperating a problem in this horrible situation where these kids can't afford shoes, because giving them one pair is not going to help them. So the next morning when I woke up, every morning my ritual, we did it this morning, is have some really great coffee.
Yeah.
I usually write in my journal, and I was writing in my journal about the experience of both enjoying giving the shoes to the kids, but also this question that Alejo asked. And that's when it kind of hit me in a shouting way. It's like, you're an entrepreneur. You spent the last, at that point, I started my first business at 18. I was 29. 11 years. You've learned how to build businesses to solve problems, whether it's driver's education or whatnot. Why think about this in a charitable or nonprofit way? Why not start a business where every time you sell a pair, you could give a pair, and that way it's sustainable. So the kids get the shoes every 3 months as they need them, because you're continuing to sell shoes every 3 months. So that was
and
really...
And you're focusing on the same areas.
Yeah,
right?
that was the original idea of Tom's. The reason Tom's exists today was literally me coming up with an answer to Alejo's question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as it's been said, no one needs a 3/16 inch drill bit.
No.
They need a hole.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're buying the solution to a problem, and sometimes a problem they don't even know they have.
Yeah.
So in you bringing that realization, okay, people in America would likely buy this shoe, so that's a good business opportunity.
Sure.
Because it's a different shoe. At that time,
style-wise.
Skechers hadn't knocked it off yet.
Yeah, it was totally unique.
Yeah, and then also the chance to do something good. And again, we're at this intersection of, I don't have to pick one. I don't have to be in business to make money.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no.
Or do good. Because a lot of people would say, well, come home and start a nonprofit.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for me, like, it backs up even, like, if I really dig deep into this, and I have in my journals, is like, like, I remember, like, hearing of these amazing mission trips, right? And like people going to Africa and Cambodia and these like far off, and like I kind of always wanted to be Indiana Jones. Sure. Like that was like if I had a career path, if I wasn't gonna be a professional tennis player, I wanted to be Indiana Jones. But I think the thing is like I would hear of people coming back and sharing in the church that I grew up going to about these amazing trips and these transformative experiences, and at the same time, the missionary or the person who goes on a mission trip seemed like a very like different path than being an entrepreneur or business person. Like they looked different, like they had beards and they looked like they were like living on the land. And then you looked at like people who I knew who were kind of the business people giving money to the church. They had suits and ties and clean shaved, and so to me like it was always like this total diversion. And I think it was in Argentina, and especially after I came back to California and I started realizing like we could actually build a business and help people at the same time, that those two worlds really collided. Yeah. And that's like, I feel like sometimes like, you in life, you hope it's a huge privilege and blessing if that happens to you, where kind of something that your soul and your heart is yearning for collides with something you're good at. Yeah. And those two things collided when I was 29.
Well, I think more people need to find permission and find expression for that to happen.
Yeah.
As a way to honor God and do good in the world by thriving and excelling. And that, because I've listened to you work out the math, because when you started it up, you had enough money to buy 4,000 pairs of shoes.
Yep, exactly.
And so, and a traditional thinking is, well, if you want to help 4,000 kids, then just give those 4,000 shoes away. And had you done that, that'd be all it is.
Yeah.
Those 4,000 kids would have shoes.
I had like $40,000, and like that was like pretty much all the money I had in my name at that point.
And people assume, by the way, you hear Tom, you Google it, see what's been estimated to be worth. They assume you had you're flush with cash, big silver spoon, whatever, $40,000.
That was it. I mean, that was like, and that was including not just the cash I had in the bank, but the potential credit lines on my credit cards.
Right.
So if you really think of like cash in the bank, is probably half of that. And so when I thought about like, okay, how do I help these kids? If I would have, like you said, if I would have just raised money or donated, that would have been it. But now we've given 88 million shoes away. If I would have started back then and said, I want to help 88 million kids get shoes and I'm going to go raise money, no one would have given me $500 million to do that.
Okay.
So it's like, that's the thing that's so amazing about when you create a social enterprise that is for profit and helping people, that it can, if it does scale, sometimes it's great even if it doesn't. Like I always tell people all the time, like, had Tom's only benefited a couple hundred kids every year and I kept going back to Argentina and got that joy in my life and take my parents and my friends to go, It would have been all worth it.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't have to become some big business to be meaningful in your life and meaningful in the people you're helping. But if it does, to think about, like, that we've literally given $500 million away.
It's unbelievable.
In terms of shoes and eyesight surgeries
we'll
and
get
clean
into that
water.
in a minute. But to think about that, because I think in Scripture, Jesus has these parables of the talents.
Come on, yeah, exactly.
And what you're talking about is it's fine to give away 4,000 shoes, and that would have been fantastic. But you created a return on investment in what God gave to you and put in you that has been able to compound and compound and compound.
And I mean, that comes straight from Scripture. I mean, it's like it couldn't be more clear.
All over the Bible.
Yeah.
Principle of multiplication from the beginning to end. Be fruitful and multiply. 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 And I think God wants us all to think along those terms. And again, people have for years done buy one, get one free sales.
Sure.
And you're just the first to come along and say, buy one, get one free, and the second one's not going to be for you.
Yeah. It's going to be for someone else.
And we take that for granted now because, like we mentioned, it's very widely done and widely spread. And it's good. A rising tide lifts all ships.
Totally.
And I think you're going to honestly go down in history as being someone who introduced a whole new way of doing business that has been, in a good way, copied all over the place and helped a lot of people, and that you've helped people see business as a different possibility. But at the same time, it also, I think, has brought about businesses who are using this more as a sales gimmick than as a core model and a philosophy of doing it. So what would you say to the business or the entrepreneur who wants to now pivot and bring about this and have it come across not as gimmicky but as authentic?
So my wife and I have a fund in which we invest in social entrepreneurs, and it's one of the great joys of our life, since we have been blessed that we can be the early investors in so many organizations. And we have a very specific criteria, and that is that the giving element of the business has to be integrated at the core of why you exist. It cannot be a marketing experience. And so I think if you are a company that you're thinking about pivoting in or incorporating giving into your model, it's better to not do it at all unless you can do it like full tilt, like fully engaged, because customers will understand the difference. And I think the other thing is that because so many companies now have, like, I get all these pitches of businesses, and sometimes I tell a business, like, you know what? You have a great idea here. I would not incorporate a giving thing. Like, if you want to be really philanthropic after you make some money, then that's great. But like, you're trying to put two things on top of each other. Seth Godin, I don't know if you read any of his books. So he has this book called Meatball Sunday, right? It's like, we all like meatballs, we like Sundays, but together that's not a good, sometimes like when people try to incorporate giving into their business model, it feels like a meatball Sunday. It feels forced. So what I always say is, like, really, really look at, like, if you're creating a business because you have a passion to make a difference in a specific area and that business can help, then I say go for it. But if you're trying to add that in, like, as an ingredient, it doesn't work.
People can smell that.
It just doesn't work. Like, just build. There's nothing wrong with just building a business, making money, and then if you are making money, being philanthropic and being generous with that. But the businesses that incorporate giving, that really thrive, that do well, are the ones where it's just like integrated in.
What I respect so much is that you committed to it before there was proof of concept. You committed to it before. I mean, you didn't say, okay, we're going to sell a ton, and when it's profitable, then we'll give a ton away. You said, no, one in, one out. And that's the name.
From day one.
Buy a shoe today, give a pair of shoes tomorrow. And of course, the company Tom's is shortened for Tomorrow's Shoes.
And thank you for clarifying that, because most people call me Tom, and I spend so much of my life trying to explain to people that Tomorrow's was the name of the original shoe, and then it became Tom's.
Right. So we're buying a shoe, we're giving one out tomorrow, Tomorrow's Shoes, Tom's. But you didn't make money for years. And I think that was what was really, really blessing to me.
Years.
But you gave from day one. The shoes were going out, even when there was no profit.
Even when we were losing money. We were losing double money then.
So how many years?
3 years. 3 years.
To get profit?
3 years until we broke even. And especially it was painful in year 2 because we were growing, so we were needing more capital to grow. But then we were also losing more money because every time we sold a pair, we actually had to make 2 pairs. But the truth is we saw a light at the end of the tunnel. And look, I mean, in the earliest days back in Argentina, like, we didn't even know we were creating a business. We just thought we were doing something cool, something fun, something interesting, a reason to come back to Argentina, something that felt good in our hearts. I was running the online driver's ed company at the time. So So really, it was never seen as a business until the point to which it was so clearly going to be a business. And then it was really just a matter of, can we hold on long enough until that curve, when the inflection point happens and you can actually be profitable.
But I'm sure during those early years it would have been easy, to fudge with it. But you held that line from day one.
Yeah.
This is how it's going to be. And I think that's one of the reasons probably God has blessed as he has, because it wasn't when we see it works will be a blessing.
Yeah.
It was from day one.
Took
This is how
faith.
it's going to be.
That's the thing. We talked on the phone it was maybe 2 weeks ago now, and I said, of all the things that are going on in my life now, the thing I'm most grateful for is I've had an opportunity to put my faith in action again.
Yeah.
And the truth is, in the early days of Tom, that's why I loved it so much, that's exactly what it was. For those 3 years, it took faith. It took a tremendous amount of faith that, if I do the right thing, if I commit to serving the poor, if I do this business this way, we will be blessed, we will be sustainable, hopefully we'll be profitable. And then, once Tom's took off, and we started making a ton of money, started helping a lot of people, got all this media accolades, then it was okay, where does my faith show up then?
Yeah.
It's not that it's away, but it becomes more of a compartmentalized thing. As many people, it's it became part of my Sunday ritual, but not my 7-day-a-week ritual.
Wow.
And so just recently, I have been able to, re-engage that part of me, which has just been, I think, the reason why I've kind of had this second birth as an entrepreneur.
And we're going to get into that. But the what you're saying, I think, is so important for people to hear, because I think there's a lot of people in the apartment phase, the Venice Beach apartment, right, with all the interns pushing the tacos out of the way to have a meeting, garage, of course, as it always goes. And they're thinking, if I can just get to here, it's going to be great. Where you're saying, in some ways, it was easier to have faith in the early days, and success becomes more complex even than failure.
By far. It was so easy to live just with such a pure heart and such a pure focus before we ever made any money, because we were totally dependent on faith.
Yeah.
And then once you have the comforts of success, then it's where is that showing up?
I think that translates to church planning so well.
Does it?
Oh, absolutely. The way, when I read your book, I hear you talking about those early days and the fight and the challenge and the bus going down. And it's and I think back to 12 years ago, starting Fresh Life, and thinking about our seed days and our early days and running out of money, building out a building, and just the fight it took. And it's those are the best days ever. And so I think the question is, for both of us and all of us, is how do we keep the fire in our belly? Even when there is success? Because we shouldn't self-sabotage to not have success.
No. I think it's two things. It's so interesting you ask that question, because I think that on one part, it's constantly pushing yourself, surrounding yourself with thinkers and people who are going to be mentors and challenge you to get outside of your comfort zone. But then I think, as I'm reflecting, and I've been doing that so much these days, is I also think there's a period sometimes in which God says it's a little bit of a hibernation. It's you can't always be on, right? And so it's kind of just rest and get ready, because I'm gonna shout again, and you need to be energized and ready, and you need to be prepared to kind of put it out there again.
So take that rest, but then also left out. Second part is take that fight. When the rest becomes decades, that's called something else. It's called early death, right? So a lot of people are dead at 30, but not buried till 70, kind of a thing.
You don't want to be there. But I do think it's interesting where you can, whether it's in planting a church or starting a business, everyone I talk to that has built something, their very best memories are when it was the hardest. And there's something there.
Wow. So embrace the hardness when you're in it.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to really just on a personal note, thank you, because of what the company has meant to our family. As I think through all the difficulty of you starting the company, it's such a precious thing to me. And I had the chance to tell you about it, but this is my daughter, Lenya, who's now in heaven. And of course, the day we're filming this is 6 years to the day from the day she went to heaven.
Wow.
And this was her last birthday request. She asked me for a pair of Tom's shoes, and I bought them at Jack's Surf Shop in Newport Beach, and there I am giving it to her. And then the sparkly red that she was wearing that day.
I just remember us making those shoes. That is just so crazy. Because it's as a company, you just make these things and you hope that people will love them. And to think of this beautiful little girl who loved them so much.
So then her sisters all had them on that day, and so there's her older sister.
Wow, she needs a new pair.
Yeah, she did, and there's a Daisy as well, and Livy. So then she wasn't wearing them long before. She busts them out with every look. She's wearing them with a little bridesmaid dress there, and they meant so much to her. We told her all about Dorothy and the No Place Like Home and Click 'em Together.
Clicking the heels.
And then the real special part of it was, of course, when we picked out the outfit that we would bury her in. They meant so much to her for the months until she went home. We found them in her bedroom, and they had a Hello Kitty sticker in them. And now you can see, 3 months was all she had them. But she wore
them every day.
She wore them to pieces. And we think about it when we stand at her grave now, and No Place Like Home takes on a whole new meaning because she's in home, where we're going to see her again. And so I just wanted to personally, I know you've given 88 million pairs of them away to kids who needed them, but not just the pairs that go global do good, because they meant a lot to our family, and it was a special connection between me and my daughter. And so I just wanted to thank you for that, for fighting for your dream because of the way that God used it even in our life.
Thank you. Wow. It's just, when you told me that story before on the phone, it was like, after we got off the phone, I just sat there and, you can get so wrapped up in just trying to make something work, right? And like, even 12 years later, it's like, you're just trying to figure out like, what's the next step? And then when you take a moment, you say like, this beautiful being on this planet for such, unfortunately, a short period of time, it meant something so to her, and you were able to teach her about giving back, and like that moment at such a young age, it's so powerful, and you just don't think of those things. You don't know those things when you're working hard every day trying to make something happen. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And there's another connection to our stories because, of course, as I share in my book, Lenya's beautiful eyes, God used her to be able to give sight. We donated her corneas, and the whole Through the Eyes of a Lion metaphor is about eyes being opened to new faith, but also these two people that got each of her corneas, and they got to see because of them. And I love our connection because through Tom's Eyewear, you guys have been able to help 600,000
people get their eyesight back.
600,000 blind people have received their sight back.
Yeah.
Through a pretty simple surgery.
Yeah, the cataract. Of all the things I've been able to do on giving trips, we've given about 75 countries around the world. I've been on 40 plus trips in the past 12 years. The most incredible experiences I've had have been in the eyesight restoration. And I've gone like in Nepal. I remember this one young woman who had 2 kids in her 20s. Had cataracts in both eyes, which is really rare. Usually it's one eye goes really bad first. Yeah. And we did the surgery. I was scrubbed in, watching the doctor in like the foothills of the Himalayas, kind of Indiana Jones like, I will say.
You've come full circle.
And not the next day, but the following day we came back and we took the patches off and we saw her see her 2 kids for the first time.
Gosh.
And it was just like, wow. It was just like the doctor I was with, he said, this is the greatest show on earth. And he was like, yes, this is truly the greatest show on earth, to get to see a human meet their kids for the first time just because of a 15-minute surgery, because someone bought Tom sunglasses in Jack's surf shop.
One of my last memories with Lenya, sadly, was her on my lap, and we were early morning. I was drinking coffee, and I was snuggling her, and I was reading the news. And I was specifically reading the news of the Newtown shootings. And all these funerals were being planned that week, these 5-year-old kids, kindergartners. And I vividly recall, and I read about this in Eyes of a Lion, asking the question, how on earth do you plan a funeral for a 5-year-old? And wow. I actually remember pushing the question away. I wouldn't even answer it. Like, how can you do that? I wouldn't answer it in my head because I was holding my 5-year-old daughter, and I just couldn't even allow myself to personalize it. Well, little did I know that I would be planning my 5-year-old's funeral within days.
Within 5-6 days after that,
days. And and having, of course, had to walk through those waters and have that in common with all those parents of the Newtown shootings, as a kindergartner went to heaven in those same days. And this, of course, now connects us to another passion that God has put inside your heart and another fire that's in your belly. And I think one of the things you're referring to, that God has you coming kind of a little bit out of your hibernation to shake off and to shake up the sleep a little bit. And now here's another fight.
Yeah.
Here's another fight. And that is, of course, when it comes to gun violence.
Yeah. I mean, it's now been 4 weeks and 5 days.
And when we're watching this at Fresh Life, it's another week or so later.
But it's still very fresh, but yet so much has happened in the past month that it feels like, wow, like that was like it seems like a long time ago. But you know, we live in California half the year and Wyoming half the year. In this particular time, you know, in November we were in California. And a shooting happened in Thousand Oaks, the Borderline bar. 12 people died. Yeah. And my wife called me. I was on my way to work. I was in the back of an Uber, and I was kind of catching up on emails, which I like to do, and on the way in. And she said, you know, this happened literally 15 minutes from where our son goes to preschool. And she said, I'm not going to take Summit to school today. And then, even more disturbing, she said, I don't know if I'm ever going to take him back to school, because 2 weeks ago there was a shooting in a synagogue, and a week before that there was a shooting in a yoga studio. And then she said, and did you know that in 2018 there have been more shootings in schools than ever in the history of the United States?
Gosh.
And so she's like, so how can I as a parent feel good about dropping Summit off at a preschool, knowing that this is, you know, 15 minutes from where this happened? And she was very emotional. I was kind of, she caught me off guard. I was like doing my work, like, you know, kind of in work mode. And then she said, you know, someone has to do something about this. And I said, I agree. And then I hung up. And this is where I say sometimes God whispers, sometimes God shouts, sometimes like it truly is a moment where you have no choice but just to be a vessel. And that's where that happened to me. This moment, I knew exactly what I was risking and what I was doing and what potentially, you know, I was up against. Because when I got off the phone with Heather, I felt more than ever in my life like someone was not someone, it was me. And it was Tom's. And the reason that I had stuck with Tom's for 12 years, even after maybe going into a hibernation phase or feeling like my best life and my best work was behind me, was for this moment. You know, we have a massive community of over 10 million people that have bought our shoes. And I really just felt with everything inside me that they are standing by ready to take a stand on something that is important. And as far as I was concerned, nothing is more important right now in our country than figuring out how to end this epidemic of gun violence. And I didn't know anything about it, really. I mean, besides reading all these horrible
And you're
headlines.
not anti-gun. I mean,
And I'm not anti-gun,
Texas,
100%. I mean, like, you know, I mean, my brother's a big hunter. I hunted as a kid. I have lots of friends that are gun owners. Like, not at all. But when I recognized at this moment that, like, there has to be something to do to keep people who are not mentally fit from having guns,
100%.
Then we have to do it. We can't sit here and say, just because this has become politicized, because the politicians have made us believe that you're either anti-gun or you're pro-gun. Like that's not what
you
this
can
is.
You can be either and be anti-gun violence.
Yes.
None of us are for that.
No one is. And so at the back of the Uber, I wrote an email to our CEO, to our board, and said, "Look, guys, like if we've ever had an opportunity to really stand for something, now is it. And we can't wait. We can't like do research. We can't think about this. Like we need to act. We need to act right now." And I asked him. I said, "Look, like we give a lot of shoes away every year. Let's really dig deep into our resources and see what could we do to help end gun violence." And so we came up with something really simple. We had two real things. We said, you know what? We're going to take basically all of our profit for the fourth quarter, which is the most important quarter in retail.
That's a big deal.
And we're going to make the largest contribution in the history of the United States to ending gun violence. That's $5 million. And as importantly, we're going to give every American an opportunity to have their voice be heard, because what we recognize is there's all different types of people and opinions on guns.
Sure.
But 90% of Americans say, and in the large majority of responsible gun owners say, you should have to have a background check. I mean, you go and get a driver's license before you can drive. But right now, you can be a felon, you can be someone who has a mental health record, or you can be a domestic abuser, or even the worst is you can be on the suspected terrorist watch list and go buy up to 5 AK-47s a day.
And the crazy thing, as I was Googling it, of course, because talking to you,
Yeah.
and I actually first seen you on the Tonight Show
Yeah.
was when I first kind of saw this come back onto the. And it was funny because right around the time a mutual friend said we needed to meet, and I had just seen you on Jimmy Fallon. But the reality is that 20% of guns in America are sold without a background check.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Of any kind.
it's not that statistic is interesting. 20% might not sound like a lot, but the 20% that are
It's
sold,
1 out of 5, and that's crazy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but even if you think about the 20% that are sold without background checks, there's a reason why those people don't want background checks, because they have a background that makes them unfit to carry a gun,
Right.
or to use a gun. And so when I recognized, so at first it was my wife calls, and I'm just like feeling this like electric shock of like, I have to do something. I don't know what I have to do,
Yeah.
but I know we have to do
But
something.
God said that's your fight.
It just immediately was clear of like we have to stand for ending gun violence. Like
Sure.
like that just if not us, who? If not now, when? Like that quote came in my mind. And then within a day, because I grabbed people together and just like the fire started, I said, like, how can we end gun violence in a way that will bring people together and not divide them further?
Yeah.
Because one of my like the things that have been so saddened by over the past 4, 5, 6, 7 years is just our country's getting more and more divided on issues that are actually human issues.
Yeah.
That we actually, if we really just cut out any of what we read in the media or this or that, I was like, no, we all want our kids to go to school and be safe. We all want to have an environment that we can that will be there for our grandkids and their kids. And so to know that a universal background check will keep domestic abusers, keep felons, right out of jail. You can come out of jail right now and literally go buy a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes no sense. And so when we focused on that, we said, okay, well,
It makes it specific. It's one.
yeah,
It's
just
one,
super specific, and something that 90% of Americans agree on, and that no matter where, you can be a very proud gun owner, you can be a hunter, and say, look, like,
I think a lot of Americans actually would be surprised to know that isn't the case. Most
yeah,
people probably would assume.
that's been a huge part
Yeah.
of this, is that so many people have been like, what?
Right, you're telling me, yeah.
On some states have background checks, but not at a universal
Across the
level.
federal
yeah.
level.
And that's what allows the loopholes with online purchases, gun show purchases, things like
And
this.
so we all wanted to help, but you've made it very easy for anybody to make their voice heard in that way.
Yeah, so literally, and this is one of the things that I was, when I was on Jimmy Fallon, I got very emotional, and people have asked me, like, why was it such an emotional moment? And I said, well, part of it was I knew I wasn't just doing to keep my wife feeling safer, but that my wife represents millions of other moms and dads that are hearing about their kids doing lockdown drills at school instead of fire drills.
Yeah.
Did you know this is the first time in the history of the United States that the public school system is on record to do more lockdown drills than fire drills?
Yeah. That's
I mean, if that doesn't wake you up,
and the statistic that there are 300 mass shootings a year.
yeah,
in the
over
country.
300. We feel like at Tom's and right now, because there are so many moms and dads that are feeling the same way Heather was feeling, like we need to create a simple action and one that could be effective on with our government, with our politicians who represent us. I mean, that's the whole point. So we said, okay, let's create a technology on the website on toms.com that in less than 30 seconds, anyone, whether you've ever heard of Tom's before or not, like it has nothing to do with whether you're a customer or you're part of our
It's completely
tribe.
free.
Completely free. Go to toms.com and in 30 seconds you can send a postcard, which very few people do these days. Yeah. We don't send a lot of mail.
It's
actually a real printed postcard with a stamp on it.
Someone is licking the thing.
Yeah. So we said in 30 seconds or less, you can send a postcard and it will go to your representative. So you put your name and address in the site, It immediately it knows exactly who your representative in Congress is. It mails them a postcard to them. And the most important thing is it will hit them all in January, because that's when they're back in session. We have a new House of Representatives, new Congress. They're going to get there and their offices are going to be flooded with postcards. So we launched this, once again, when this is shown, but 4 weeks ago, but so it'll be 5 or 6 weeks. Literally 700,000 Americans have gone to toms.com. Almost the majority of them are people who aren't even customers of Tom's.
Cool. Yeah.
They're just people who want to make their voice heard, and they sent postcards. And those postcards will show up in these offices. They will make these representatives know that this is not something we can sit on anymore.
Yeah.
This is an action we have to take. And ultimately, it will change the history of our country in gun legislation.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I think I speak for all of us when we say we can't wait to see what's next and what the next phase is going to look like. Even as you didn't see this one, but it was that system being set up that allowed this to happen.
Sure.
And now the exponential growth even of your progression and your evolution. And so to watch what's going to happen is going to be an inspiring thing. So I'm grateful to count you a friend and inspired to watch you doing what you're doing. And I encourage everyone to support what's happening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. For more content, please subscribe to Fresh Life and to my channel on YouTube so that you don't miss out on any of the new things we got cooking up.